Selamat siang pemirsa Kemenkeu TV, kembali lagi bersama saya Dodi Septariza pada secara langsung live streaming event pilihan dalam rangka Annual Meetings World Bank Group 2018. Pada sesi pertama sebelum istirahat siang tadi, kita sudah menyaksikan dua event pilihan yaitu Press Briefing World Economic Outlook dari IMF yang dilanjutkan dengan The Measurement and Macro Relevance of Corruption, a Big Data Approach Seminar. Setelah ini kita akan ada dua pilihan event yang kami tayangkan secara langsung. Yang pertama adalah Empowering Women in the Workplace Seminar. Dan pemirsa, ada sebuah ungkapan yang mengatakan bahwa di balik kesuksesan seorang pria, pasti ada sosok wanita hebat di belakangnya. Ungkapan itu menunjukkan kekuatan dan potensi yang dimiliki oleh para wanita. Namun di era pengaruh utama gender saat ini, wanita tidak lagi harus ada di belakang dan tenggelam di balik bayang-bayang hegemoni pria. Saat ini wanita bisa berkarya, bekerja, dan menggunakan semua potensinya yang ada sama besarnya dengan peluang yang dimiliki pria. Makanya tidak heran, banyak tokoh-tokoh nasional dan dunia berasal dari kaum Hawa. Pada seminar ini kita akan bicara peran wanita dalam dunia kerja, tentunya bersama dengan wanita-wanita hebat dari penjuru dunia. Siapa dia? Yang pertama tentunya adalah Menteri Keuangan Republik Indonesia, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati. Selanjutnya ada Managing Director IMF, Christine Lagarde. Lalu Priyanti Fernando, Executive Director International Women's Rights Action Watch Asia Pasifik. Lalu ada Vera Songwe, Executive Secretary United Nations Economic Commission for Africa atau UNECA. Lalu ada Caroline Wilkins, Senior Deputy Governor, Bank of Canada. Dan semuanya akan dimoderatori oleh Rosiana Silalahi. Baik, speakers tadi merupakan wanita terhebat dari berbagai sektor dan negara yang tentunya akan membuka cakrawala kita tentang peran wanita dari seluruh penjuru dunia. Baik pemirsa Kemenkeu TV dari kawasan Nusa Dua Bali, kami ucapkan selamat menyaksikan Empowering Women in the Workplace Seminar. Selamat datang di Annual Meeting IMF World Bank Group 2018. Dua perhelatan besar diselenggarakan di Indonesia pada tahun 2018 ini. ASEAN Games Agustus lalu sudah terlaksana dengan sangat sukses, baik dari sisi prestasi maupun dari sisi penyelenggaraan. Dan kali ini Indonesia kembali menyelenggarakan event besar berikutnya, yaitu pertemuan tahunan IMF dan World Bank Group tahun 2018 yang diselenggarakan tanggal 8 sampai 14 Oktober 2018 di kawasan Nusa Dua Bali. Dan Kemenkeu TV dengan bangga akan menyiarkan rangkaian acara pertemuan ini kepada Anda semua. Namun sebelum itu, kita akan mengenal terlebih dahulu tentang apa itu IMF World Bank Group Annual Meetings 2018. Sidang tahunan IMF World Bank Group ini merupakan forum pertemuan terbesar bidang ekonomi, keuangan, dan pembangunan di tingkat global yang mempertemukan pihak pemerintah, yang dalam hal ini Menteri Keuangan dan Gubernur Bank Sentral dari 189 negara, dan pihak non-pemerintah yang menguasai sektor keuangan dan ekonomi dunia. Setiap 3 tahun sekali, negara-negara di dunia bersaing untuk menjadi tuan rumah pertemuan ini. Karena annual meetings ini dapat memberikan potensi manfaat yang sangat besar bagi perekonomian negara tuan rumah. Dan tidak heran apabila banyak negara bersaing untuk bisa terpilih sebagai tuan rumah kegiatan ini yang diselenggarakan setiap 3 tahun sekali di luar Amerika Serikat. Sedikit flashback ke belakang, proses pemilihan dan penetapan Indonesia sebagai tuan rumah sudah melalui perjuangan panjang sejak tahun 2014. Indonesia terpilih setelah mendapatkan suara mayoritas melalui voting oleh 189 negara, mengalahkan Mesir dan juga Senegal. Melalui penandatanganan Agreement for the 2018 Annual Meetings of the Boards of Governors of the IMF and the World Bank Group, pada tanggal 10 Oktober 2015, Indonesia secara resmi terpilih menjadi tuan rumah IMF World Bank Group Annual Meetings 2018. Terpilihnya Indonesia menjadi tuan rumah menunjukkan tingginya kepercayaan dunia internasional terhadap Indonesia di dalam bidang keamanan, stabilitas politik, dan keberhasilan di bidang ekonomi. Dan dengan menjadi tuan rumah IMF World Bank Group Annual Meetings merupakan momentum bagi Indonesia untuk menunjukkan kemajuan ekonomi dan leadership serta komitmen Indonesia dalam penanganan isu-isu global. Annual Meeting 2018 ini merupakan acara event internasional terbesar yang pernah ditangani Indonesia. Dengan jumlah negara yang terlibat mencapai 189 negara, dengan total delegasi diperkirakan bisa mencapai 18.000 hingga lebih dari 20.000 orang yang terdiri dari lebih dari 400 orang seluruh Menteri Keuangan, Menteri Pembangunan, dan Gubernur Bank Sentral. Sekitar 20 kepala negara dan kepala pemerintahan. Sekitar 5.000 pejabat tinggi dan delegasi resmi dari pemerintah dan Bank Sentral. 1.000 orang senior manajemen, ekspertis, dan staf IMF dan World Bank Group. 1.000 orang para pengambil keputusan dan eksekutif senior dan organisasi internasional, lembaga keuangan internasional, sektor swasta, akademisi, lembaga think tank, dan NGO. 2.000 jurnalis dan awak media internasional, dan sebagian dari para delegasi dan peserta juga akan membawa spouses dan keluarga untuk memanfaatkan kunjungan ke Annual Meeting 2018 ini sekaligus untuk berwisata di Indonesia, dan diperkirakan jumlahnya dapat mencapai 4.000 orang. Rangkaian Annual Meeting ini akan terbagi dalam beberapa pertemuan utama, yaitu yang pertama, Pertemuan Development Committee atau DC Meeting. Yang kedua, Pertemuan International Monetary Financial Committee atau IMFC. Yang ketiga, Pertemuan antar Menteri Keuangan dan Gubernur Bank Sentral negara G20. Nah, berikutnya adalah konferensi dan seminar dan pertemuan yang strategis. Pada jangka pendek, beberapa manfaat langsung dari Annual Meetings 2018 antara lain, penyelenggaraan Annual Meetings 2018 berpeluang akan dihadiri oleh kurang lebih 18.000 orang dari delegasi pemerintah dari 189 negara, para pelaku utama sektor keuangan, CEO perusahaan, bank, lembaga keuangan dunia, pimpinan dan staf IMF dan juga World Bank dari seluruh dunia, CSO dan NGO, akademisi, jurnalis, press, observer, dan lain sebagainya. Delegasi peserta Annual Meetings 2018 tersebut akan melakukan spending di Indonesia lebih dari 7 hari lamanya. Dengan pertemuan dan event yang diperkirakan sebanyak lebih dari 2.000 events. Konsumsi makanan dan minuman, transportasi dan akomodasi, belanja dan hiburan, dan belanja wisata ke berbagai destinasi belanja yang dilakukan para delegasi peserta Annual Meetings 2018 tersebut diharapkan dapat mendorong pertumbuhan ekonomi dan memberikan potensi penerimaan devisa. Yang berikutnya adalah manfaat intangible yang juga diperoleh bagi Indonesia adalah promosi wisata dan showcase kemajuan ekonomi Indonesia kepada dunia. Melalui lebih dari 1.000 jurnalis berbagai media internasional yang hadir pada Annual Meetings 2018, kehadiran ribuan delegasi atau peserta pada saat low season di bulan Oktober diharapkan juga akan dapat menggerakkan roda perekonomian Bali, terutama di sektor meetings, incentives, conference, events, atau MSCI, pariwisata, sektor jasa, industri kecil, dan sektor pendukung lainnya. Tentunya dengan banyaknya peserta, agenda pertemuan yang padat dan atensi dari media internasional akan mendatangkan banyak keuntungan negara tuan rumah, yaitu Indonesia. Apa saja keuntungannya? Yang pertama, Indonesia berkesempatan untuk mengangkat prioritas nasional dan isu domestik ke dalam ruang lingkup pembahasan internasional. Hal ini dapat dilakukan dengan metode benchmarking atau memberikan contoh positif dari apa yang Indonesia miliki, seperti kemajuan dan daya tahan ekonomi, proses demokrasi, keragaman atau diversity, serta toleransi yang akan menjadi inspirasi Indonesia untuk dunia, serta menjadi showcase dan antitesis dari perkembangan terkini di beberapa negara di dunia. Kedua, dengan kehadiran para pembuat kebijakan dan peserta yang penting dari seluruh dunia dan liputan yang masif, event ini akan menempatkan Indonesia dalam spotlight yang dapat mempromosikan dan meningkatkan posisi Indonesia di dunia internasional di beberapa aspek termasuk pariwisata. Ketiga, rangkaian pertemuan tahunan ini juga akan memberikan kesempatan bagi Indonesia sebagai salah satu negara anggota G20 untuk berperan lebih besar dalam mengarahkan kebijakan dunia sebagaimana salah satu tujuan dari kerjasama internasionalnya. Seluruh rangkaian acara
Selamat sarong.
Hello, can I test? Okay. Good afternoon.
Selamat siang semuanya, selamat datang di Bali, welcome to Bali. Nama saya Rosiana Silalahi dan saya akan menjadi moderator untuk panel hari ini. Saya sangat senang sekali setiap kita mendiskusikan tentang isu ini, saya selalu bersemangat. Hari ini kita akan mendiskusikan
Women in the workplace. Before I start, let me begin with our hashtag today, that is Women for Growth. Please tweet your comment, photos, etc. regarding our discussion today. But I also want to remind you, please keep your cell phone on silent mode, please. I'm so honored to be on the stage with these extraordinary speakers. Let me begin with the one and only Managing Director of IMF, the one who needs no introduction, Madam Christine Lagarde. Always good to see you, ma'am. And actually, we keep the chairs vacant because that should be for Minister Sri Mulyani, but she's still in the meeting. She will be joining us at 2:30. She will join us for sure. And the next side is Vera Zongwi, UN Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of Economic Commission for Africa. Her life side is Ms. Priyanti Fernando. She is the Executive Director, International Women's Rights Action Watch, Asia Pacific. And last but not least, Senior Deputy Governor, Bank of Canada, Caroline Wilkins. The economic imperative for female empowerment and the policies that support its achievement are well known, such as boost economic growth, reduce income inequality, and strengthen economic resilience. But in fact, women are still marginalized. They are not represented enough in leadership position, not represented enough in policy decision making. Women are overrepresented in more routine job, which is easily replaced by technology. Recent work by the IMF has shown that gender diversity matters. Now, we're going to discuss what's new in these findings. Let me begin with you, Madam Lagarde. You always believe that empowering women is very important in economic. What's new?
Okay, let me just backtrack for a second. What we have demonstrated clearly due to the very good work produced by the IMF is that contribution of women and reducing the gap that there is both in terms of labor participation and in terms of wages is good for the economy, is good for competitiveness, and is good morally. But we focus only on the economy, and we decided to go a little bit beyond these excellent general findings that adding women to the workforce, including women in the economy, is good for prosperity. Because what additional work produced just recently, and I'm just about to officially release this work, is that actually there is even more contribution by women than we had initially anticipated. And the value of that research is actually to go deep down into what specific contribution women bring to the economy, identifying that actually because of their differences, whether it's biological, whether it's cultural, whether it is by virtue of the tasks that we have often been associated with, we provide something that is different from what men provide. So men and women complement each other, and as a result, cannot be actually substitute. And women bring about something different, something more, because it is different from what men would provide. In other words, if you were just to add one full-time equivalent worker, irrespective of gender, you would get plus. But if you bring about somebody who is not just a normal full-time equivalent, but somebody who is coming from a minority present in the workforce, i.e. a woman, then you get an additional upside as a result. So I think that's the key finding. It's that because of that complementarity between men and women, bringing in more women who are currently in more minority than men actually delivers more value than was initially considered. So it makes the case for bringing women to the workforce. That is the first big finding. There's another study that I will show you. This is just teasing here. There's another study that I will show you in a minute when you ask me about the future of work and the role of artificial intelligence, new technologies, and all the rest of it.
Digital, etc.
But that one is really fascinating.
Okay, I'll get back to you soon. I'm going to Ms. Fernando. Dr. Zongi. Tell us about your experience. Are there economic sectors that you see most likely to bring women into formal employment? If so, how can we promote these sectors given importance of gender diversity?
Thank you very much, and let me start first by thanking the International Monetary Fund, but in particular, Madame Lagarde, for having me here and the Economic Commission for Africa. I think that there is never enough women doing work around women and talking about the importance of women, so this is particularly important.
Yep.
And I think coming to your question, normally when we talk about women, there's always this tendency to say, what's the sector we should put them in? But I think as economists, we normally say we don't want to pick winners. We want to create the conditions for winners to emerge. And I think that's one of the powerful things about the report. It shows in some sense that if you start with the premise that it's important to get women into work and that women's employability is important, then the question becomes, what is it that you need to do to make that happen? And I think that the work that is in the report, some of the work that ECA has been doing around women shows us, for example, that if you increase access to electricity, women, the employability of women goes up by almost 9%, and we have some work that we've done on this in South Africa. And that just by definition, getting women into work, it doesn't matter the sector, increases GDP in Tanzania by 2%, GDP in South Africa by 10%, GDP in Egypt, and if there are Egyptians here, by almost 34%. So it is, I think we start with the premise that we just want to get women into work. And then we ask the question, what is the sector in which, it may be the most effective? And then we say, if we can improve electricity, then women don't need to work too hard, or women can actually cook, store, and do something else, and then they can go into a different profession. If we can help with childcare, then women can do better. If we can help with access to finance. So I'm answering your question from the infrastructure side first, is to say what is the infrastructure that allows women to get into work. Now on the continent, we know that many women, particularly in rural areas, work in the agriculture sector. But we also know that particularly on the continent, 80% of the land is owned by women, or at least by men, or at least is notionally owned by men. 80% of the land, 70% of rural women work on the land. So if we say that we want more women to do agricultural work in a manner that is productive, because we do not only want women to go to work, we want them to actually have productive, efficient employment. And again, an employment that makes them more prosperous. And so we see that there are constraints to access to owning the land, which is, I think, one of the perennial constraints that we have on the continent, and a lot of work is being done in that light. But once you own the land, then you also need access to financing to be able to get the right technology that will allow you to do that better. So I think agriculture becomes one of the fundamental ones that we need women into. But there is also women in the services sector, education and health sectors. We know, and I think that this is a little bit also what the report shows us, that it's not just getting women into work, but that women do better, and sometimes when you have women in particular employment, that the overall societal benefit is much better. And I think the fascinating thing about this report, and I think as we do a lot more work on women, gender, and employment, is that we are now able to unpack some of the information that we have about where women do well, where women can actually contribute a lot better in society. And I really do want to thank the team from the IMF that is contributing to this body of knowledge on why it is important to have women in the workforce, just as we have men.
Okay. To Ms. Fernando, I also like to hear from your experience. What are the biggest barriers to women's progression, and what role can the public and the private sectors play?
Okay, so like my previous speakers, I would like to say thank you very much for getting me on this panel. Thank you very much. It's a civil society representation, which I think for the IMF is very commendable, that we have a voice here on a panel that is discussing anything, but particularly gender. So for that, I'm very impressed by the changes that have taken place in the IMF under your leadership, Madam. And so for that,
I think we should give applause on this.
But I work for an International Women's Rights Action Watch, Asia Pacific, which is a women's human rights organization. And if I was going to look at women's empowerment, I would kind of take a different tack on it. I would say that we would need to put women first. We need to look at women as people and as human beings. And while there are constraints maybe for the IMF to do this, I would think that just considering women as being mobilized for economic growth is insufficient. So my hashtag, for example, would not be women for growth, but would be growth for women. And I think that's a challenge I would like to put to the IMF, to think about a different way of looking at growth so that it would actually empower women. The other thing that I always feel a little uncomfortable about, and it could be because I'm not an economist, I'm a women's rights activist, is this assumption that women have to be somehow brought into the workforce. And it gives me the feeling that we think that women are not working. And I think if you walk around Bali or you walk around any city in the world, you don't see women sitting around having a beer and playing cards. I don't think that's the situation. I think women are working all the time. I think what we don't know as economists is how to count that work. That work is not being counted, both literally because it doesn't come into the statistics, and metaphorically because it is not valued. And I think that's really important. because women are working in many sectors. Women are particularly working in the care economy, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about that, but women are also in the unpaid family labor, in informal employment, at the bottom of global value chains, in precarious jobs. And so in the care economy, and here are some numbers, somebody's calculated that 16.4 billion hours per day is spent on unpaid care work, which is like about 2 billion people working 8 hours per day without any money or any remuneration. In Asia Pacific, women spend 4 times more time on care work than men do. Another calculation is that if it's valued on the basis of a minimum wage, it would actually, care work could contribute to 9% of the global GDP. So I'm just a little bit surprised that all these years we haven't actually managed, A, to count care work, and B, to actually bring it in, count it in both ways, both statistically and, well, statistically yes, but more to evaluate and bring it in to our national accounts and our whole GDP counting. And then, of course, there's all the other things that the previous speaker spoke about unpaid family labor, largely in agriculture, and women in the informal sector. So my answer to your question, straight answer to your question, is that one of the big barriers is about the way we think about how women work. And if
Is
we
it
want
from
to
men or
change,
us, from women, the way we think?
sorry?
Is it the way we think from men or us as women?
No, I just think the way society thinks, and societies all over the world are very largely patriarchal, and so they do not think about, they devalue women's contribution. So it's women are contributing to the economy. Maybe there needs to be some thinking about how we can actually count that and bring it into the economy, because it's not that there is an unused pool of labor out there that's waiting to come in. So that's, let me stop there for the moment.
All right, now to Ms. Wilkins, you are in top level management. Why do you think gender diversity is important in policy decision making?
I think it's instrumental because you can just imagine that what considerations are brought to the table, whether you're debating public policy generally or you're debating monetary policy, is going to be a reflection of who you are. And you're more likely to get that diversity of thought that is instrumental to sound decision making if you have a balance of men and women at the table. And diversity in other dimensions as well. And perhaps the best example is the one that you just provided, in a sense of how do you measure output, how do you measure GDP? You know, the people that decide are going to think about the things that we should value, and it's possible that men and women may value different things. When it comes to central banking, which is my business, it's also extremely important. There's a lot of studies out there that show how the share of women in governing council boards, so decision-making bodies, has increased over time, and that's fabulous. And it's allowed people to do studies to see whether or not, in fact, like Madame Lagarde said at the beginning, people think differently depending on their gender. And in fact, they find, yes, there's some studies that show that in fact, governing council boards that have more women tend to be a little more hawkish. That means they're more likely to want to increase rates faster. I don't know if that's true. I couldn't speak for Canada in that dimension, but these are interesting results. And if you want more women to work in areas that are related to STEM, and I put economics and finance in STEM, the women that are there, when they look up and they think, what do I want to do? They're going to need to see charismatic and inspiring women up there, and they can say, I want to be like them. And so I think there's a virtuous circle that can happen. The more you have women in leadership, the more you have younger women who say, that's what I want to do too. And so I think there's just a number of reasons. And the final one I'll put to people is that we live in a world where people wonder about decision-making bodies, and they're losing a bit of trust in them, especially if they're public, but also if they're private. And they say, are these decision-making bodies reflecting what I'm concerned about? And that's eroding trust. And I think one of the best ways to help build the trust, aside from taking decisions with integrity, is having the decision makers reflect the society in which they serve. And well, women just happen to be a large part of the population.
Wow. And I believe that you are also the first female in the board, right?
I'm the first female senior deputy governor. Yes.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. Now, please welcome Finance Minister of Indonesia, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati.
Oh, good to see you.
We call her Ibu here.
Good
Nice to see you. You don't give me a kiss? I told them.
Give you a hug.
I told them that you were busy dealing with politicians, answering why we, make this important event. Okay, I'm joking. Anyway, so Madam Lagarde, I will.
But she does that beautifully.
Yeah, of course. She loves politicians, especially the ones who, give a stupid argument. She loves that because then she can teach the politician to be smarter. Can we edit this? Anyway, this is life. Anyway, Ibu Sri Mulyani, since you just came, we are talking about women in the marketplace, in the labor market. What I'm going to ask you is what steps are being taken in Indonesia to increase female labor force participation? Any particular sectors? What are the challenges you see, both in terms of making policies and also you as the first female finance minister?
Wow, that's a very difficult question. Okay. I think first we recognize that for a country to be able to improve the work participation, labor participation, especially among women, it's going to be good. Good for the economy, but good for the woman and good for the family. That's for sure. And Indonesia, it's been quite some time that the labor participation for women is low and not improving. There are a couple of things that we can identify as an obstacle for that. First, of course, if you can talk about the supply and demand. The supply side on the woman's side in this case. There are, although for Indonesian women to work outside the house, we are not finding a constraint in terms of prohibited or you are not allowed and all those wages. But still, this country is very paternalistic. So in a way that women being seen of more a secondary in terms of the income generating activity and being seen as a second priority for them to actually take or in charge for the family, that is like a norm. And that's why maybe first that we need to address the issue about this norm, that creating an obstacle for women to then work and be more confidence and participating in labor force. Second one, I think in terms of the nature of women, and this is also happened and I observe in many of my own experience when I work at the university, but now most importantly when I'm in Ministry of Finance. Many of the young women, when they enter the labor force, they're actually very excited. But then when they face with the real, what you call it, time dilemma, at least we count it time because we are all women and men, we only have 24 hours a day. So when they are getting married and have a family and then getting pregnant, everything suddenly it's become the burden of women. Especially it's become a burden of women because you have to carry baby, you are the one who pregnant, you are going to deliver, and then motherhood is always being seen as a woman job. And this is exactly then creating the burden for the woman to continue work while at the same time they have to carry the role as a mother. Without any support from policy, I think it's going to be very impossible. Many Indonesian family, if you are coming from middle upper class, you can afford to have a domestic worker to support you. But if it is not, it's really become a trade-off that's impossible for them to address. So for us, meaning that if you want to see the labor participation of women, you have to be able to reduce this trade-off or burden and what kind of policy in more established institution, like in our institution, Ministry of Finance, is becoming now a best practice, mandatory, but even in this case, we have a championship for an office who provide a woman-friendly office. So you are providing childcare, you are going to have a breastfeeding room, all those things is being provided. It's not mandatory, but I make it as mandatory, as a what you call it, affirmative. It's not mandatory, meaning it's not in the policy in this case, but we put it. So I visited in Medan. They are very, very proud because knowing that Ibu Menteri is going to visit. So they provide me with all the country visit and the office visit. And it's very lovely. They have a cafeteria in which they provide lunch, and then on the side of it is a playground for children below 5, and then also the breastfeeding room. I think this is going to at least creating less tension for the woman. The third is, I think some women also still feel that some of the occupation is being perceived as just a man's job. Actually, Madam Lagarde is the one, when he was appointed as a finance minister, that was long time ago. I was finance minister, that was under SBY presidency. I was attending the G20, and then she came in the room, and she's always lovely, of course, Christine Lagarde. And then she found, who's the other woman in the room? It's only Sri Mulyani. And then she came to me, and then, oh, we the only 2 women finance minister. Finance minister or finance in general is always perceived as a man's job.
Yes.
This is really male-dominated, and that's why for us, really working together is very important. What is stereotyping, which is very sad, even when I was in the World Bank, sometimes they feel that when women appointed as a manager, they actually become a sharp elbow, and they're competing among women in this case. So sometimes, and this is sometimes joked by the male employee, that they are, see, Sri Mulyani, you want to promote more manager women, but see, they cannot cooperate among themselves. As it's like they are like, see? So this is in many times, and Madame Lagarde, I think at some point we have the initiative to have a dinner with you and with all the VP and manager women in the World Bank. She's always very generous with all the women. She gave the encouragement that all of us need to work together. It seems like the world is just too small for a woman to cooperate. I think this is also a very good lesson for all of us. Can we work together and really promoting and seeing all of us to actually, it's just a very rare opportunity. Okay. So battling with this perception that there is a male job, and this is, and for women, you really have to be an extraordinary to be able to enter this male-dominated job. That creating additional burden. I think one book by Condoleezza Rice, the title is Twice as Good. For a woman to be in any position, they have to show that they are twice as good that even the men should prove. That creates a real huge burden. So you can imagine, they have to carry as a mother, they have to have this norm, they also have to carry this burden to prove that they are twice as good to be able to in the same position. Okay. That is actually the what is the obstacle of many women to be in a labor participation.
So you
can I
yeah, of course. No.
No, I just want to clarify one thing. We have been asked by young female journalists who have just recently had babies if we could organize for them to be able to breastfeed. So the IMF and the World Bank, I'm sure, have organized for breastfeeding facility. Anybody interested here? It's there.
Wow.
It's good. Yeah.
It's okay.
In the IMF, I don't think that I see any breastfeeding room. You have it? You have it?
Of course.
Oh, you have.
Compass TV have it.
That was long time ago.
My office has it.
No. When I was ED in the IMF, that was long time ago.
No.
The IMF
you have it now. Okay, so you were...
Now Christine changed everything.
Oh. That's the benefit of women power. So you were the same as the finance minister, 2 female finance minister.
Ibu Ani was before me, but I joined.
Okay. Yeah. So I can imagine when you two went conferences and other gentlemen would think, they're only two, but these ladies drive me crazy. I can imagine. Okay, I know you would respond to Ibu Sri Mulyani, but can we move to other topic? Yeah.
Can I just say two
All
things
right,
very quickly? I think congratulations on what you just said, because I think you brought out a number of things that the women's movement is asking for, which is actually to redistribute care work, to reduce gender stereotypes, so what you were talking about, the kind of work that women do. And I think those things are really important to mainstream, because if you don't mainstream those things, however much you do everything else, women will either have a double burden and will not actually make those, will not be empowered or make those advances.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to move forward to Madame Lagarde. We are facing a new era of technology, digital economy, a robotic machine. How do you think this kind of change in technology will affect women, the automation and also the future work? How do you think this will affect women?
Well, it will affect all men and women. But what is characteristic, and actually which is published today in this research paper, is that women will be affected more so than men. That's the key finding of this study. And it's not because they're women and because they would be inferior species. No, not at all. It's just that because of points that you made earlier, they often do tasks that are not as value-adding. They are more repetitive. They are more likely to be automated. And as a result of that, the jobs that they're doing are going to be affected first before the jobs that eventually men are doing. Now, it's not a massive proportion, but yet again, it shows that despite new technologies, despite artificial intelligence, biotech, and all of that, the women will suffer more than men as a result. And our study concludes that women are at 11% risk of seeing their job dislocated, gone, whereas men are at a 9% risk. There's a very interesting study that has been done in this work, which extrapolates from 30 OECD countries where 26 million female jobs are likely to go. And if you extrapolate to a larger number of countries on a global basis, you're talking about 180 million jobs currently discharged by women that are at risk of dislocation, disappearing because of technologies. So that's the bad news. In a way, the good news is that the more you move into services, the more there will be women, as opposed to manufacturing and those jobs that required, physical strength. But yet again, in those services, the sectorial destination for women is going to put them either at a disadvantage or not. And if you take the sector of information, technology, communication, where there's a lot of IT content, women, again, are at risk, and they're not in equal position compared with men. Numbers are all in there. I'm not going to bore you with that. But something can be done about it. Yeah. And that something is about education, is about helping them in the direction of being not only computer literate, but completely adjusted to those challenges of technologies. And it's all about directing the resources towards education and the right skill sets that will equip them going forward, and anticipating that technology will affect them more so than men.
Yeah, we are going to talk also about what kind of new skills that be needed in the future. But let me get back to you, Ms. Wilkins. Every sector has to adapt with the new technology, including banking sector. How can technology, including fintech, create new opportunities for women?
Well, there are many challenges, Madame Lagarde said, but at the same time, it opens up a new world in a way that could be very beneficial to women. And you just start with financial inclusion. That may not be an issue so much in Canada, or the U.S., but even there are access to funds and access issues, but especially elsewhere in the world where many are unbanked. You can think of the opportunities that fintech could provide by providing banking services, lending services that are more platform-based and perhaps not so much tied to a network that's very male-dominated, but is more distributed. And when you look at that, you just think that the opportunities for entrepreneurial activities could be quite important for women. I think as well, in any country, there are opportunities for women in entrepreneurial activities in technology. The government of Canada just has an example of where they're using the Business Development Bank to put funds towards women in tech. So women entrepreneurs who are owning tech firms, emerging tech firms, and that's a really big emerging industry in Canada, all across the country, and probably in many countries. And so I think there are opportunities to seize the technology, but it does require education, and it does require, I think, a very proactive approach. We can sort of wait to see if women are going to be interested in STEM or interested in some of these new jobs that will be there. But research shows that women are more likely to choose a major if they know another woman who went to the same college who they find inspiring. And so just one last thing, the Bank of Canada is very invested in reaching out to women in universities, especially in the undergrad. Personally, I've talked to over hundreds of students across the country to do just that, and we're sending out our women economists to try to get them excited in areas that will serve them well in the new economy.
Who were you inspired by when you were a teenager to become like this?
That's a really good question. When I was a teenager, there weren't a lot of women leaders in finance at all, so I wasn't inspired by a woman. But as
you were not inspired by women?
No, by a
talking about women issue here.
By a particular woman. I was inspired by actually male leaders. I hate to always pick one who I thought were doing really good work for the country in a way that would serve people. Yep. But as I moved up, there are other women who, as I moved along in my career, who became leaders. And that was extremely important. Yep. And so Madame Lagarde is one of these women, and there are others who you look and you think, this is somebody who I admire and is doing an important job. And I think that's what women need more of.
Yeah. You all are the inspiration for all women. Please give applause to all these inspiring women. Okay, now to Ms. Songwi, digital technology create a flexible time of work actually, and this could be an opportunity for women despite even though there are still barriers in the society. So tell us, what are the challenges that developing countries face to bridge the digital gender gap?
Thank you very much. I think the first one, just building up on your point, is about making the women that are already in the digital space more visible. Mm-hmm. And I think there are quite an amazing number of young women, African women I was going to say, but young women globally that are in the digital space. And I think that, at least for me, but probably for many of you, and we'll test it in a few minutes, a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, the movie Hidden Figures came out. And we found out that it was basically 3 black female mathematicians that allowed man to put, now we say man, that allowed man to put a spaceship into the moon. We would never have known about these 3 black women. Now let's run a test. Can anybody name the 3 ladies? You can name the first man that landed in the moon, but does anybody know the name of the 3 ladies? Sorry? Dorothy Vaughan, Ellen Robinson. And this is the reason we don't know. We don't even know the names of the women that took the first, and I think this is the point. We need to make the women visible. And I'm sure there are examples like this in all of our countries of young women that are doing amazing things in the field of science and technology, and they are not visible because in front of them are other people that take the credit. And so I think the task is just getting these ladies out and making them more visible. It's the same across the world. I gave you an example in the US. There will be an example in Cameroon, in Paris, and everywhere else. So I think that's the first one. Because once those women become visible, the younger ladies then say, I can also become a mathematician. I can actually put a spaceship into the moon. I can actually do something different. So it's that decision that you see one person ahead and you say, I can do it too. And we can never underestimate, I think, the power of seeing Madame Lagarde heading the IMF and how many more young kids will be willing to do that. Or in Indonesia, Ibu Sri, that is a Minister of Finance. So I really think that that's the most important. Now, once we have done that, then the question becomes, how do we give them access to the technology to do that? And today we have 250 million less women that have access to any sort of IT or internet services in the world compared to men. So again, it's just making sure then that in the same geography, in the same environment, how come we have that many less women? On the continent, it's 27 million less women have access to technology than do men. A lot of this is about giving them access in an affordable way, in an accessible way, in a way that, so one, then they need financing to be able to get access to the internet and to be able to connect. And I think once you do that, then you begin to bridge that digital divide. An important statistic that comes out in the work that has come out also is about, and you mentioned it, is the tech hubs. I think, at least on the continent, we've seen an explosion of tech hubs. About 5 years ago, there must have been about 140. Today, there are 442 tech hubs. Interestingly enough, almost over 30% of them are women that are doing these startups. But exactly as you said, they are not doing startups in technology. What we find, and I think this links with the discussion that we had before, is that a lot of the startups that are run by women are actually in the consumer care business. So it means that we are taking our ideas from doing childcare and working at home and transforming them into ideas that become marketable. And so it's actually, I think, quite a telling statistic. It's first consumer care, it's design. Surprise, surprise, it's education. We know how to educate the kids better. So we're actually doing a lot more startups in education, and then healthcare services. But then when you go the next step is once these women have invented these things, how can they get access to patents? And on the continent, particularly in Africa, the cost of patenting an idea is more prohibitive for women than it is for men. So what ends up happening is that when a woman has a great idea, she hands it over to a man that sort of takes it and then patents it and gets the benefit out of it. So when we think about all the big ideas, the big IPOs, we can think of IPOs that are launched every other day by men and not by women. So we also need to ensure that there is some access for women's ideas. We must be able to not just get the woman into work, but we must protect the woman's idea. The wonderful thing about IT is the woman can stay home. She can take care of the kid, and she can develop an amazing new idea. But then we must make sure that the cost of that idea is protected by policy. And I think that this is a very, very important point now on the continent is how can we protect patents and ensure that women then have access to their own brains and that they can monetize their brains when they want to, how they want to, and with whom they want to do it. And finally, of course, is education and STEM. We need more women in the STEM field, but research has shown again that once you have more women doing math and physics, and then there is more women that get into that space. So I think the work that has just been done by the IMF on this is
all right, we got the message, but Madame Lagarde, you want to respond to that?
No, not respond. I wanted to ask you a clarification. Okay. Why is it that protecting an idea through patent is more expensive for a woman than for a man? Explain that.
It's not more expensive by definition, but because the woman, by definition, has always lower incomes. Okay. The bridge becomes more difficult.
Because women always has the lower income. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Ibu Sri Mulyani, let's talk about what Indonesian government has invested. Even among women, there's still gap between those who's in high skill and low skill job. What policies should Indonesia invest in early on to increase more young people to be interested in entering sectors like science, technology, engineering, math, etc.?
Well, first from the statistic, when we talk about the formal sector, the women that work in the formal sector in Indonesia is much lower than men, 37% versus 64%. So it's almost half below. But in STEM, actually, if you compare among ASEAN countries, Indonesia is among, or Asia even, Indonesia is among the highest. We are at 23% women in STEM.
And that's the highest?
That's among the highest if you compare even with Singapore, China, and other ASEAN countries. I think if we look at Indonesia, many of actually women, they don't feel that they are constrained to actually majoring in STEM. I think that is also something. You actually can find quite a lot that they feel that although this is perceived with stereotyping, that this is male-dominated field, but Indonesian women or young women, in this case as student, they are not feel constrained to actually there and even excel in that area. But as I mentioned earlier, the dropout rate after you graduated is actually very high. Either because of, in Indonesia in general, the job which is using STEM is still relatively low. This has something to do with the whole design of the policy in Indonesia, which when the economy is growing, we put more research and development as a career. I think this is the area that we really need. If you want to become middle income, upper income country, then you are going to be able to invest more on research, innovation, and R&D. And this is what the government is now doing. President Jokowi wants us to organize better, first by consolidating all our research fund, which is now has been fragmented to many ministries and institutions, and we don't see it, it's not feasible, and we really don't see what is the impact for the economy. So consolidating and organizing under the Ministry of Higher Education and Research is going to be very critical. And then you have to expand it. The second one is, I think, the most important for the policy is also creating a role model. In Indonesia, usually on the STEM, on the medicine, maybe there is a stereotype that woman is okay in the medical field. Okay, I mean. In the lab, maybe also okay, although it's not in what you call it perceived as a hard science. So we really have to still continue dealing with the stereotyping, like addressing this issue that it is fine. Luckily, I think Indonesia just recently hosting the ASEAN Game, and many of what you call it a field, sport field, which is perceived as a man, is actually the woman get the gold medal. So I think it's really a lot of things which is actually through that kind of, if we can have a Science Olympic and all those, last time I received young student at the primary school, which is hosted by one of pharmaceutical company. They are already doing for 8 years in a row championship of research at the very early level, that is primary school. Most of them is actually women, Christine.
Wow.
Out of these 15 that they are visiting me, because they are then invited to go to Jakarta, and then one of the activity in Jakarta is going to see any woman figure or any public figure, and they requested to have a meeting with me, and 15, almost 3/4 is women.
Actually, it doesn't surprise me. We know that women smarter than men.
Yeah.
Doesn't surprise me.
They're smarter in academic also. If you look at the GPA, on average, they are actually also much better than men. But in the work, the survival rate is lower. And that is something that we really need to look at what we just discussed. Whether the drop rate is because of the uneven playing field, because the women have to become a woman, meaning that they are pregnant, they are all those things. Or is there any hindrance which is coming from legal norm, which is adding to all this? But it is again and again. In STEM, I think Indonesia is doing, we don't discriminate, and I think in terms of interest, the supply in this case is quite equal.
Okay.
But how to make sure that they are not going to drop out? This is another area, and that has something to do with the total economy and how we develop as an economy with many policy. that is allowing for this innovation, creativity, and then also for the woman to be able to survive. And if I can comment with what Vera mentioned earlier, with the digital and the technology which is allowing flexibility, this phenomena is definitely addressing the issues to some extent. This the dropout rate because of the time inflexibility giving more burden for the woman. So technology definitely is going to create more opportunity for women to work, to participate, because they are becoming very flexible. But what we really want to see is more a high-paying job for the woman. But monetizing many of the activity which is in the past has been perceived as a domestic activity which is unpaid and not coming to the market. For example, like childcare, this is invaluable. You can see that women will pay whatever that they will pay as long as they can get somebody who taking care of their children in such a quality way. So it's priceless actually. But when you put it in the market mechanism, it's suddenly the price drop. And this is something which we can call it the market failure of valuing the work which is being done domestically by many women.
Yep.
And this is something that maybe as all of us maybe have to promote more GDP, which putting the value or imputed value of many of the domestic work.
Okay, Madam Milagard, you want to say something?
IMF can do that. I think they are actually can promote the GDP with all the women work in the household. Christine, you really have to put that as your legacy. As your legacy.
I'll come to that because that was a point mentioned by Rincha as well. I want to congratulate you on what you do for physical exercise, gym, and encouraging young female athletes. Because we need to encourage and celebrate women who win. Because women winners change the face and the perception that people have. I'll tell you a little story that I heard just recently from Japanese authorities, and it's a true story. Tennis as a sport in Japan was not regarded as a really high-value sport when it was played by women, until a Japanese woman won the US Open. And at that point, suddenly, tennis became a really, really powerful sport, one that was worthy of financing and support and all the rest of it. So I tend to think that you need to squeeze where it hurts. And if we believe...
That is the skill of women, squeeze where it hurts.
Yeah. We're good doing that. Very good.
But, you know, if it works to have a woman winner, and if it changes the perception that people have of the ability of female athletes to actually succeed, we just need to help and encourage at that level. I know it's a little bit outside the economic circles here and the economic theory, but it's critically important if we want to change the perception. To your point about GDP, and that's a point that we discussed a little bit before you arrived, we will be having in November a statistic conference at which we will be examining how we collect data, how we can identify value and the value of work that is not recorded currently under GDP. And this is familiar to me because back when I was finance minister in our days, France, as president of the G20, actually pushed the identification of the non-GDP recorded work. There was a fantastic commission with Stiglitz, Amartya Sen, and other luminaries, and they did produce that report. And yes, it is true that there is huge value and it's not accounted for, it's not reported, and we need to explore that further. So yes, we will take up that challenge.
Very good.
It's not only about us, it's about the whole community embracing it.
All right. Okay, I just got a message that we only have like 5 minutes left, so we have to move pretty quick. This is the last question for you, Ms. Fernando. What skills do you think the most important thing in the near future? And how can we make sure that both female and male equally benefit from these skills?
This conversation has been a little bit surreal for me because I think I work a lot with women. I mean, it's not that it's not an important conversation to bring women into STEM, but there's a load of women out there who have no even option of finishing school, let alone getting into STEM. And I'm sure you know that in Indonesia, and it's all over our Asian countries and developing countries. And that is largely because, again, this whole business of care work is stereotyped as women's work. It's not available, affordable care is not available in the public sphere. And so women are just bound, they don't have a choice. That's what they have to do. And even some of the things that you were saying is about, okay, digital technologies will help women work at home. But how do we give women the choice, the same choices that men have? And that would be to is to take the domestic responsibilities, to share it within the family, to share it between the private and the public sectors, right? The household and the public sectors, to provide public care. So I think that's one thing that I think is really important, because otherwise you will find girl children dropping out of school to look after their younger kids. You will find women walking miles. And the other thing, of course, is infrastructure. We are talking about how do we create that enabling environment. The infrastructure, particularly in rural areas, is so dismal in many places that women spend a lot of time just actually, say, fetching water, for example. So how do we actually do that? And the other thing I think I want to remind, especially these very distinguished ladies on this panel, is that sometimes for us to get to that, and I think the Madam Minister mentioned it, for us to get into that to get into the important decision-making positions, we have to delegate our child care to someone else, right? And how unfair is that for somebody to have to leave their children at home and migrate to somewhere else to look after somebody else's children? I think that's what is the impetus for international domestic migration, domestic worker migration, and I think those are some issues that we really have to talk about in addition to some of these issues that very important things we talked about right now.
Okay. Madam Lagarde, you say something? Or this is my last question for you. Okay. Or
but can I follow up on that? Because first of all, you know, even surrealism can be really of great value, as art has demonstrated. But, you know, to your point, I think it's important that the choice be there.
Yes.
And if you actually account for the value of the work that is provided at home, be it by the mother or by the father or by whoever is that person, number one. And number two, if you eliminate the discriminations that apply against women in about 90% of the countries that are members of the IMF, we still have discrimination, where a woman will not inherit as much as her brother, where a woman will not be able to go to work without the husband's permission, and so on and so forth. So we need to make progress on both accounts. Remove the discrimination so that a woman has the choice, and value the work that is being done so that, you know, you reconcile the two and you open up the choice that should be available to all, not just men, but men and women.
okay.
Thank you.
I've just got the final message that we have to conclude our discussion because we have no more time. So I'm sorry that actually I was planning to open up for Q&A, but we don't have more time. Madam Lagarde, would you like to say something as the final one, just a short one?
Invest in women education. Full stop.
Full stop, exactly. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining our discussion today. Thank you for our extraordinary speakers. Thank you. Don't forget, like Madam Lagarde said, invest in women, diversity matters, and gender diversity brings benefit all its own. Thank you once again. Enjoy your day. Enjoy Bali. Goodbye.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while...
Pemirsa Kemenkeu Korpu TV, baru saja kita saksikan Empowering Women in the Workplace Seminar. Dan sekarang waktunya kita untuk melangkah ke event berikutnya. Kalau tadi kita membahas tentang peran wanita, pada event kali ini kita akan membahas peran pemuda dalam Youth Dialogue 2018 Youth at Work. Seperti kita tahu, masa depan sebuah bangsa ada di tangan pemudanya. Pemuda mempunyai peran yang besar, tidak hanya sebagai pelaku ekonomi, namun juga sebagai inovator yang menghasilkan inovasi-inovasi untuk memajukan negeri. Seminar ini akan membicarakan kontribusi pemuda dengan menghadirkan pemuda-pemuda berprestasi dari penjuru dunia. Yang pertama adalah Aya Cebi. Beliau adalah founder Africa Youth Movement. Lalu ada Anel Mkozo, founder dari African Entrepreneurship Initiative. Lalu kita punya Fioza Osmani Saduri. Beliau adalah Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee Parliament of Kosovo. Dan yang sudah tidak asing lagi adalah salah satu pemuda keren dari Indonesia, Ahmad Zaki, founder dan CEO Bukalapak. Juga akan ada Graham Buckley, Director of ILO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, yang memberikan perspektif dari sisi ketenaga kerjaan. Dan juga Ahmad Sihab, Edlin, Senior Koresponden IJ Plus sebagai moderator. Dan juga sebelum dialog ini dimulai akan ada opening remarks dari Carla Glasso. Beliau adalah Deputy Managing Director IMF. Baik pemirsa Kemenkeu Korpu TV dari kawasan Nusa Dua Bali, kami ucapkan selamat menyaksikan.